I've been wanting to try gouache for a really long time now. So I was really excited when a friend of mine gave me this set of 12 Holbein Artist gouache colors. They bought this set about 7 or 8 years ago, but never really used it, so now it's my turn, and I cannot wait to try this out. In this video, you can come along as I test out these paints and create my very first gouache painting from start to finish. Since I have never used gouache before, I'm not quite sure what to expect, but I do have a few decades of experience with watercolors and acrylics. Here are some of my old paintings. These are watercolors that I did when I was 17, which was way back in the 90s, and here are some acrylic paintings I did when I was in my 20s. So I know these are different mediums than gouache, so they work a bit differently, but they do share some things in common with gouache. So I am hoping that some of my knowledge will transfer over into gouache. So we'll see what happens. There are 12 colors in this gouache set, and they all seem really vibrant. I'll be painting in this mixed media sketchbook that I found at a thrift store. The paper is 140 pounds, 300 GSM, so it should handle the gouache pretty well. And as you can see, it has a slight texture. I treated myself to some new Princeton Velvet Touch brushes, plus I'll be using some of my older Low Cornell brushes. As for my palette, I just made a simple makeshift one for now, by taping parchment paper onto a piece of hardboard. I've also got a rag, paper towels, and some jars of water for cleaning my paintbrushes. So let's begin! First things first, let's swatch these paints and see what these colors look like. I was forewarned that these paint tubes are rather old, so they might have dried out a little, so let's see. They do seem a little bit stiff right out of the tube. I think gouache is supposed to be creamy when it comes out. Yeah, this leaf green color is definitely dry, but it is re-wetting pretty nicely when I mix some water into it. So far, my impression of these paints is really good, but in hindsight, considering this is my first time using gouache, it probably would have been a better idea to use actual new paints. That way I could have gotten a more accurate idea of what they're actually like to work with. But hey, this was free, so I'll take it. And I certainly don't mind a challenge either, especially an art challenge. I know gouache can be used thick or thin, so as I swatch these colors, I'm aiming to make the paint thicker on the left side to see what that looks like. And then I'm adding more water and blending it out into more of a wash as I extend the color to the right. Okay, so my last color, jet black, is totally dry. It's not coming out at all. I'm gonna try to revive it later using a watercolor medium, but for now, I only have water here with me, so I'm just not gonna use black. So here are my finished swatches. And I gotta say, I love this color range. It is so me. I love these vibrant, saturated colors. And here's my palette after swatching. Gouache really does dry quickly. So right now, I'm just reviving these dried colors by dripping water onto them using my water brush. With my swatches done, now it's time to play and experiment. Whenever I try a new medium, I like to get a feel for what it can do before I attempt an actual artwork. So what I'm doing here is just meant to be messy and not look like anything. The main thing is that I'm just paying attention to what the paint feels like to work with. So I'm basically just mixing different colors together to see what colors I can make and seeing how they look on the paper. I'm also seeing what it's like to overlap colors on top of one another. I'm trying light colors on top of dark colors, and dark colors on top of light colors. What I'm looking out for here is I'm curious to see if the paint underneath mixes with the new color I'm adding on top. Because I've heard that that can be a problem with gouache, and your painting can end up looking muddy if that happens. But so far, so good. I'm not experiencing that here, so I'm really happy. And now I'm just seeing what it's like to try to lay down colors next to each other and then blend them with a damp brush. But to be honest, I'm finding it a bit weird. It feels like these colors need to be more wet to blend together better. So I'll experiment with that more later. And so I'm just carrying on like this for a while, mixing more colors and adding more layers, and then painting more of these little lines on top. So I'm actually really having a lot of fun with this. Gouache seems so cool. Like, these colors are just amazing. They are so bright, I can't believe it. I know these super saturated colors aren't for everyone, so if you do realistic art, then you probably prefer more muted colors, but for me, these are just right. And I could make the colors more muted by adding white or black or brown. Hey, I just realized this set doesn't include any browns. But that's okay, I can always mix a brown if I wanted using the colors that I do have, so that's no big deal. So this little test area is looking like a chaotic little abstract painting or something, and I like it. I think this is really promising. I think I'll be having a lot of fun with these gouache paints. And by the way, if you're wondering how big this area is that I've been working on, it's about 2 inches by 5 inches. I do like to work small. And here's a close-up so you can see some of these details. Look at how well the paint layers, and the colors really retain their vibrancy. Now I'm going to try blending again. I'm going to see if I can paint a gradient that goes from violet on the left to fuchsia to light pink. I kind of get the feeling that if these paints were more wet, they'd be easy to blend, but I don't know. Like, this is okay so far for my first time using gouache. And I'm not really looking to become an expert here, not right away anyway. I'm just playing around, and I'll be working on my blending technique more in the future. But for now, honestly, yeah, I think this is good enough. Now I'm trying again, a bit more ambitious this time. I'm going from orange to yellow to light green to a medium green. So this gradient is way more challenging, but it is great for learning. And now I'll try a little blue gradient, and I'll make this one more watery and see what that's like. Okay, so I've experimented with blending gouache and definitely learned some things. So now I want to see what it's like to use other media on top of gouache, because I think that's something that I might want to do with my paintings. So first, I'm laying down some squares of paint, and then I'll let them dry. In the meantime, I'm going to try out this small round brush and this script liner brush to see what kinds of lines and designs I can make. This round brush is great for doing both small details, and it's especially good at doing variable width strokes. And this liner brush is so long, thin, and pointy, making it perfect for adding delicate details. The way I'm using it here actually feels more like drawing with a paintbrush than it does painting. It's like I'm doodling with a paintbrush. Now, let's test colored pencils on top of gouache. I'm using Prismacolor colored pencils, which are pretty vibrant and saturated, but you can still see the gouache color underneath, tinting the color of the colored pencil that I apply on top. So it's not like colored pencils are going to be fully opaque on top of gouache. It's more like they're a little see-through, with the color underneath showing through. But using colored pencils on top of gouache does seem like a great way to add details and texture and shading and highlights. Definitely something I'll want to experiment with more in the future. Now I'll try using paint pens on top of gouache. I'm using Posca, and I'm trying out the fine 1M tip and the felt 3M bullet tip. The thing about gouache is that when you apply a wet medium on top, the gouache gets reactivated, and yep, that is happening here. You can see the gouache is sticking to the nib of my Posca. But it's no big deal really, because it comes right off when you just run the marker on a spare piece of paper. It is kind of annoying though, so I don't think I'll be using Posca or any other paint pens on top of gouache that often. Still, it was fun to experiment with. So for my very first gouache painting ever, I decided I'll paint a moth. I designed this moth in Procreate and then drew the line art on my paper using a red Prismacolor Colorase colored pencil. I love the Colorase pencils for sketching because they are so easy to erase if I make a mistake. Oh, not that I ever make mistakes though, right? No, not me, never! Since this moth is symmetrical, sometimes I use a ruler just to make sure I get the proportions correct and as even as possible on both sides. But I don't expect it to be perfect, and I don't want it to be perfect, I just want to have fun. So my moth design is inspired by folk art, so it's kind of stylized with these flowers and fun designs. I'm definitely not going for realism here, but I do like a lot of detail, so I keep adding more and more to this sketch. Detail is definitely my thing. If you like my moth design, I'll be turning it into a coloring page that you can download and print and fill with your own fun colors. I'll post a link to that below. And keep in mind that it's a great way that you can help support my channel, and it allows me to keep creating these art videos for you. So the sketch is done. Now I'm just going to add washi tape along the borders because I want to paint in a background color behind the moth. And this washi tape will give me a nice clean edge. I love this pink washi tape. It's so pretty and sparkly. In case you're wondering what size this little painting is going to be, I've measured it out to be 5 inches by 7 inches. And now it's time to paint. I decided to start by painting in the background first. I knew I wanted something kind of dark, so I mixed a blue and violet and started painting it in using a round brush. I chose the round brush because I thought the pointy tip would be great for getting into those small detailed areas, like these corners around the flower petals. And this brush is great for that, but, well, I think a flat or a filbert would have been better for the more broad, open background areas. It's frankly kind of awkward painting those areas with this round brush, which kind of threw me off my game a little and made me feel insecure, being my first time using gouache and everything. And also, I did start to realize that I was painting on this background really thickly. It's like I was instinctively acting like I was painting with acrylics in terms of how thick I went. But that's just because I knew I wanted a solid, opaque background. I didn't want a washy watercolor-like background. And while I was having all this self-doubt, I made an even more important realization that sounds really weird when I say it out loud, but I could barely see what I was doing. Here's the thing, I'm nearsighted, and sometimes I wear glasses and sometimes I wear contacts. Today I'm wearing my glasses and they're a few years old, and my prescription has changed a little since I got these, but I always thought for the most part they were fine. Anyway, at some point while painting, my glasses slipped down my nose and all of a sudden I could see the artwork with my bare eyes, and suddenly it was clear. I was seeing my painting more clearly without my glasses than with my glasses on. I'm nearsighted, so if something is about 12 inches in front of my face, I can actually see it clearly without my glasses. And I'm at the age now where I need readers, so my old pair of glasses were actually a huge liability for seeing up close. This isn't meant to be a tips video, but my first tip for all you artists out there is to make sure you can see properly. Go get your eyes checked and make sure your glasses and contacts are up to date so that you can actually see your art. With the background done, now it's time to start painting the moth. I kind of picked out some colors in Procreate, but I know that my actual painting is going to be a bit different. But my digital sketch at least gives me a rough guide, a starting point. I switched to a filbert brush for this, and I'm really happy with this choice. For painting this, it just feels a lot better than using the round brush. It feels more intuitive, and I think I'm starting to get the hang of how much paint to put on my brush and how much water to use to get the consistency right. With the background, I felt like I was off to a rocky start, but now I'm already feeling like I'm hitting my stride. My approach to this moth at this point is I'm kind of treating it like a paint by number with flat colors. At this stage, I'm not trying to blend colors or create gradients, and I haven't decided yet if I will or not for this painting. Because this is a really small painting, only 5 by 7, and it's really detailed, so there's not much room in a way for adding gradients. So I might stick with a more flat look for this painting. We'll see. Oh, and by the way, I'm now using a pipette to drip water onto my palette. And this is actually more convenient than the water brush that I was using last time. The consistency of this light blue is really perfect. I'm thinking this is probably how gouache is supposed to be. I do think that some, if not most, of the gouache tubes I inherited are kind of dried out. But hey, that's totally okay. I can still work with this. Now I'm getting into some of the more detailed areas. So I switched to this smaller, thinner paintbrush, a low Cornell American Painter paintbrush that I've actually had for probably 20 or 25 years. For a long time, these were my favorite brushes, and I used them for everything, from photorealism to abstract. This size is great because I like to work really small. So I've started doing a bit of blending to create some sense of dimension here on the body of the moth. And for the antenna, I did a more washy underpainting to start off with. While waiting for that to dry, I added some more yellow details to other parts of the moth using this same paintbrush. One thing I am being careful to do on these wings is to make sure that each layer is completely dry before I paint next to it, to avoid any transference of the old paint onto my new color. And now I'm back to the antenna, trying to create more of a subtle gradient with a yellow near the tips of the antenna and orange near the bottoms of the antenna. Gonna let that dry and then paint more details on top. In the meantime though, there is plenty to do, so I jump around and paint in more details here and there, and then add some shading to the moth's head. I'm kinda getting the hang of blending with gouache a little, I think. It's such a small, tight little area, so in the future I do look forward to experimenting with blending gouache colors on a bigger area, like a background, like a sky or something. Now it's time to use this low Cornell round brush with this tiny brush head to paint in some lines on the antenna. This brush is so perfect for these thin lines. And by the way, I'm finding that this makeshift palette is actually working pretty well. The parchment paper wrinkles a bit from all the water, but the paper is holding up really well without any tearing or breaking. Oops, a little bit of green paint blobbed out, and I thought I could fix it by dabbing it up with my finger, which has worked for me before sometimes with acrylics or watercolors. But nope, not here, not this time. It blobbed out even more, so I dabbed it with a tiny piece of paper towel. I'm gonna let it dry and then come back and cover over it later. It's probably no big deal. I'm trying to add a bit of depth and shading to these green leaves and stems, but it's a bit tricky with such a small area. With watercolors and acrylics, I'm so used to being able to create really smooth transitions, like from light to dark, but I haven't quite got the hang of it yet with gouache. I just need more practice, and I'm sure I'll get there. I think maybe for my next gouache painting, I'll pick a subject with more shading and gradients in it so I can practice those things. Whereas with this painting, I did kind of envision it as more of like a flat folk art type style. So yeah, I like trying different styles of art. I could never stick to just one style because I just love so many different art forms, and there are so many different ways of expressing yourself and your creativity. So for me, it would be totally limiting if I just stuck to one art style. I would really hate that. I could never do it. But the thing that does define my art style, no matter whether it's realism or abstract or whimsical, is that I almost always use bright colors and lots of details. That's just really my thing. I have tried using more subdued colors, I have tried using less details, and it's just not me. I can't help it. When it comes to your art, you just have to be yourself and do what you enjoy. So I'm pretty happy with how my moth is turning out so far. I wasn't sure when I first started, but now it's all falling into place, and I'm already thinking about what to paint next. What do you think I should paint for my next gouache painting? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this video, please tap the like button. It really means a lot to me when I see your likes and comments. And do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my art videos. So now I'm using this tiny brush to add these tiny little lines to the moth's wings. These are like texture lines, so that the wings don't look completely flat, and also to help them look more organic. And it also helps a little bit with some subtle sense of shading. Now I'm doing a darker pink layer along this edge to add a bit more depth, layering these little texture lines. And then I mix an in-between color to paint some lines in the rest of this space. It's subtle, but I do think it adds a little something, so this area isn't just smooth. Come to think of it, I probably could have used colored pencils for this and achieved a similar effect. I add some more highlights to the head to help it look even more 3D and textured. Then I carry on to these lower wings and do the same thing. I'm kind of jumping around to different parts of this moth, but the main thing that helps me choose where to paint next is I'm looking for places where I can put this pink paint that's already on my paintbrush. By using the same color in different places, it means I don't have to wash my brush all the time. So I kind of try to batch the colors. I'm also mindful of where I'm painting so that I don't paint on wet areas. I let the wet areas dry first, and I try to be careful not to accidentally touch those wet areas, because then the paint will smudge. It does happen sometimes though, but for this artwork, it's not a big deal to fix it, so that's good. Now that the antennae are dry, I go back in and add some more brighter paint to the edges. I just want the antenna to look a bit more organic, and adding these lines helps soften those hard edges. Now I'm going to see how easy it is to use white gouache to create an outline around these flowers on the wings. I don't want the brush to pick up and reactivate the paint underneath, so I'm trying to be really careful as I use a loaded brush and a light touch. And yay, it's working well! I kind of feel like these outlines help the flowers pop more, so I like it. I want to use this light blue color, so let's see if I can reactivate this dried paint. Oops, it crumbled a little bit, but yeah, it's totally usable. Woohoo! That is a pretty cool feature of gouache. Unlike acrylic paint, where once they're dry, I do like that gouache can be reactivated like this. So now I'm adding these little texture lines to the blue parts of the wings. I'm gonna add more detail to these bottom areas of the wings. I just don't know what yet. I've already deviated from my Procreate sketch a bit, so I'm kinda just winging it at this point. No pun intended. I think adding this lighter blue helps brighten up the wings. To help brighten it up even more, I'm adding this thin white line along this edge here. It just helps create a bit more contrast in this area. And then, since I've got white on my paintbrush, I add some white to the very tips of the antenna, again because it creates more contrast. Now I'm going to add some orange details here and there. Orange and blue are opposite on the color wheel, so it'll definitely add contrast to this area. The orange is going on well on top of the blue, but some of that blue color is still peeking through, and I want the orange to be opaque. So I'll let the orange dry and then come back over it again with another layer. Let me just jump ahead and show you that now so you can see what a difference the second coat of paint makes. So basically, from here on out, I'm just adding more details and refining and adding some subtle shading here and there. I don't want to bore you with details, so I won't narrate every little thing that I'm doing. But basically, adding details is one of those things where it's really personal. Like, I could totally stop right now and call this moth done, and some people might be totally happy to stop here. But that's just not me. I am so detail-oriented, I can't help it. I love using tiny brushes and making tiny details. And sometimes it honestly feels ridiculous because it means it takes me forever to make a work of art. So if you ever wonder why I don't post more often on my YouTube channel, it's because I always end up creating really detailed works of art that take a long time to create. And the footage takes a long time to edit because there's just so much of it. But one of these days, I swear I do want to try to create quicker art. I really do. Like, I should time limit myself to maybe 1 hour for a painting or a drawing and just see what happens. Because if I did that, I could make more videos. But what happens is, when I sit down to make art, I just get so immersed in the art making process that I do not want to stop. So it's like part of me is just looking for things to do. So I add more and more detail. When you get immersed in your art like that, you're in the flow, which is a state of mind coined by the Czech psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it's a state that artists know really, really well, just instinctively. We just go there and we never want to leave. It's our happy place. I actually talk about the flow state in my artist brain video, so check that out if it interests you, because a really fascinating thing happens when you're in the flow state. And that is your brain chatter, you know, that voice or noise that's always in your head. It quiets down when you're in the flow, and you often don't even notice it. Like, you're so caught up with what you're doing that you don't even notice that your mind is actually still and it's calm and blissful. So what's happening in the brain is that in that flow state, your default mode network becomes quiet. So your default mode network is that voice or chatter that's always in your head, like in the background, as you go about your day. You're so used to it because, well, it's your default. Hence, it's called your default mode network. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes, or all the time, that inner voice can drive you crazy. Like, without even realizing it, you might be ruminating, like going on some crazy thought spiral or overthinking, like you know how it is. but doing creative immersive activities like making art can calm that voice right down. So that's really cool. And that's probably a big reason why I love getting immersed in making art. And that's why it's really difficult for me to make quicker art, because I want to spend as much time in that fun, fluid flow state as much as possible. And for me, doing shorter works of art doesn't allow me enough time in that flow state. It's just not as satisfying. Maybe I'm a flow state addict. I don't know. Just some food for thought. So yeah, do check out my artist brain video if you want a deep dive into the inner workings of our artist brains. Okay, I think the moth is done. So it's time to finish the background, starting with the flowers. I tried to do a bit of blending and shading on the flower petals, but I don't know. I'm not that happy with it, but it's okay. It's something. I'm learning, and that is the important thing. And I do know that with each gouache painting I do, it will get easier and easier, so that's cool. Now it's time to fix that mistake from earlier. Well, that was actually really easy. Just a few more finishing touches, and okay. I am officially declaring this painting done! Wow, what a journey this was, creating my very first gouache painting ever! There were times when I wasn't sure how I felt about gouache in the beginning, and I totally doubted myself. But I stuck with it and pushed past that discomfort, and I am really pleased that I finally tried gouache for the first time. And even though the paints were old and kind of dry, they were still super fun to work with, and I can totally see myself creating a lot more gouache paintings in the future. And I look forward to learning even more about gouache as I go along. Thank you so much for joining me on my gouache journey. If you liked my detailed moth painting, check out my butterfly video, where I show you how I drew this detailed butterfly from start to finish.